The I Found It campaigns that were patterned in the U.S. dealt with using a media tease campaign to get people's interest. And we had these billboards that just said, I found it, in blue and yellow. Didn't give the answer, just I found it. And you saturated newspaper, television, radio, any media you could with just I found it. And you ran that for usually a period of a week. And then you began what was called the Reveal campaign. And that was, I found it, you can find it too, new life in Jesus Christ. And then you hit those same media spots with that being the answer. So you've got people's attention. They're saying, have you found it? What is all that about? What's that campaign about? What's that ad advertising? And no one knew until that second week. It was, I found it. You can find it too. New life in Jesus Christ. And then you gave ways to respond. Telephone, letters, coupons in the newspapers. And you could get those responses back into response centers. And then you gave those out to churches that had pre-trained their people in a personal evangelism and how to follow up those contacts. And it was designed to help a city be saturated with the gospel message and for churches to follow up the new Christians and for churches to grow. Great, great strategy. Finished that, and I'd gotten a call that would I consider an assignment of moving to Asia to help with I Found It campaigns across Asia. I had said yes, I will go. I will go to Asia, and took that step of faith. About 2 weeks into my time in California, Bailey Marks, who was our director at that time, visited AIT, and I never met him. Understood he was the director of Asia, and he was passing through. And we had lunch together one day in the Garden Cafe there at Springs Hotel. And I had forgotten to ask a very important question. How long is the term? How long am I coming for? And so I asked Bailey, what are you thinking in terms of how long are you asking me to come? And he looked at me and he said, well, Jerry, when we challenge people to come to Asia, we like for them to come with a lifetime commitment. And I paused and I said, okay. And that was our signing up term. And I left there thinking, when I leave to go to Asia with my suitcase, we'll see where God leads. But it became a new faith adventure and chapter. I'd never been to the Philippines. And those of us that were assigned those days, we went to countries we'd never visited before, never seen before. You just read National Geographic, which is what I did, and found out about the Philippines. And that's the way you went. I landed in the Philippines in the middle of a typhoon and sloshed my way into this baggage terminal area, and your luggage was coming off of the baggage carousel. And here were all these cardboard boxes coming off and splashing in the water, and you're trying to get a car to keep your luggage dry. And that's how I landed in the Philippines. And sure enough, we walked into the Philippine Villages Hotel and walked into a meeting room, and we started talking about implementing a Here's Life campaign in Asia. I'd only been in the country 2 hours, and that's the speed we worked at. It was none of this, go to bed for 2 days, we'll call you. It was go right there. Walked in the door, and there was a reception desk there, and a young Filipino girl sitting there behind the desk, and she said, welcome, we're glad you're here. And that young lady, 4 years later, became my wife, Grace Torres, first Filipino I met. We began rolling out not only I Found It campaigns across Asia and helping take the same principles of mobilizing city, training churches, creative media campaigns. You didn't have media-saturated TV and network, and we quickly moved from phone banks calling in to coupons in the newspaper you would fill out and find a drop box in front of a drugstore, and you would drop your I Found It response card into a drop box, and those would be collected by the churches, and then you would get your response mechanism. The church would follow someone up. a lot of modification coming from that high-tech campaign strategy to a lower technological environment, but it worked. There were no cell phones. Most people didn't have landline phones. This is Philippines, Thailand, Indonesia, Burma, India, Sri Lanka. You got billboards and you got TV at that time. But the main mode of transportation, not a lot of buses, but you have what's called jeepney. It's a Jeep with an extended body and benches, and you seat 15 to 18 people in it. And there are tens of thousands of them, and they're everywhere. And we did bumper stickers, and you put bumper stickers on all these jeepneys and signs on the spare tire that held out, and little flag banners that came over. And our main media advertising thrust during that time were these jeepneys and then little tricycles. Tricycles are a motorcycle with a sidecar, and you could plaster those things, and the tricycle drivers loved it. You decorated their tricycle, and they became part of the media campaign. And when you say, okay, put this on, but don't tell anybody what it's about. It's just, I found it. Don't tell anybody the answer if you know it. Because many of these tricycle drivers were Christians and been trained in the churches. And you began seeing these taxi drivers and jeepney drivers get excited about, we're part of this campaign. We can drive this around. We later did that same thing in other cities using cars and vehicles. And so we'd land with this suitcase, a little film strip projector, a little cassette player, an extension cord, and these little film strip bottles. Hey, that was mediated training. That's how we trained thousands and thousands of people. If you're on a motorcycle and you have the guy that's going with you sitting on the back, he's got this training case on his shoulder and his hip. And so you're driving through the streets of Sri Lanka with this guy behind you with this case on top. And I'm not that good a motorcycle guy, but maintaining balance on the turns, and when you're going through that traffic and through the ox carts, and it's not only the ox carts on the streets, it's what the oxes leave on the streets that make it a little more treacherous. And so you really had to dodge and zip around. At that time, we would leave. There were 3 or 4 of us single men who were working, and we would leave our home in Baguio and be gone for 2 months doing this type of thing, living with the staff, living in YMCAs, living in mission guest houses, come back to Baguio, get our mail, get the next assignment, go out for 2 more months, come back again, do it again. 3 years, wonderful 3 years of doing that. But in those experiences, God used not only that foundation block of seeing spiritual multiplication take place that I'd seen earlier in my life, but the love for the church and being able to work with pastors and churches and understand this is where it needs to happen. So as I look at foundational blocks of my life, and having seen that fleshed out as I was able to work with I Found It campaigns and training churches, as they saw East Asia become the largest missionary sending base, and a large part of that is seeing the Church of Asia equipped and mobilized to send missionaries to the world to see the Great Commission fulfilled. It's been a good 40 years. God was good, and I'm so glad I said yes.